All right, guys, welcome back to Cold Pizza Watch Reviews. Today, I'm talking about the Yema Navygraf Marine Nationale. You want to know what I think about it? Hold tight. All right, guys, welcome back to Cold Pizza Watch Reviews. Today, I'm talking about the Yema Navygraf Marine Nationale GMT. Now, before I get into the specs and review on this watch, I'm going to talk about some highlights of Yema as a company, just in case you weren't familiar with them. Now, they were established in 1948. In 1966, they came out with the Yachting Graph. 67, they came out with the infamous Superman. 1970, they came out with the Flygraph, basically their first military-style watch. In 1982, the Spaceonaut went into space. Now, this is where Yema gets a little interesting. In 1986, Hattori Seiko took over majority ownership of Yema. This went on up until 2004. Now, in 2009, Ombre France takes over Yema. Then in 2020, the French Air Force and the French Navy nominate Yema as their official partner to develop military tool watches. Let's fast forward to this Yema Navygraf Marine Nationale. I've been looking at this watch quite often because I like the size of it, and the fact that it's a GMT I felt would work great on my wrist. So I contacted Yema. I said, hey, do you guys have a loaner I could borrow and do a review on? Sure enough, they did. They sent this one to me, and I'm going to go over everything I think about it. So let's get started. This thing comes in at $1,350. I've seen Yema run sales. I would definitely check in on that from time to time. But as it stands now, you got $1,350 for the Yema Navygraf Marine Nationale GMT. Not a bad price for what you get, including that this is a true GMT. Let's get into the specs. You got a case that has been completely redesigned, and it shows with a contrast of finishes and chamfers. The case is 316L stainless steel. You've got a case diameter of 38.5, lug to lug of 46 millimeters. Case thickness is 12 millimeters. Now you get a lug width of 19 millimeters. You've got a strong water resistance of 300 meters. Now, crown is screwed down with the French Navy anchor cast in. Case back is also screwed down and decorated with the French Navy logo and the words Marine Nationale. The dial takes its inspiration from the 1970s Navygraph II, and it features raised hour markers in polished steel that match the hands. The hands and hour markers play well against the navy blue dial. Both the second hand and the GMT hands are highlighted in yellow. Now, the Navygraph logo at the 12 o'clock position is also in yellow, while the word GMT, 990 feet, and Marine Nationale are printed in white at the 6 o'clock position. Beneath this logo, you see the country of manufacture, France, in bold print. Now let's talk about this GMT bezel. You got a 24-hour GMT sapphire bezel with a bi-directional 120-click rotating bezel made of scratch-resistant sapphire. You get a two-tone day-night indicator that is treated with superluminova, along with this beautiful coin edge, probably one of my most favorite features of this case. The GMT function can allow you to track 3 different time zones, but only 2 can be tracked simultaneously. Now, another interesting thing about this watch is the movement. This is the Yema in-house caliber 3000 GMT movement. It beats at a frequency of 28,800. 29 joule, regulated to plus or minus 10 seconds per day with a 42-hour power reserve. Now, the Yema Caliber 3000 is designed, developed, and assembled in France. Now, one thing that Yema notes is that while components are provided by French, Swiss, and Asian suppliers, with final assembly completed in France, and their first version was developed in 2011. So basically what they're saying is they're not vertically integrated. Like they have suppliers that provide them with parts. The movements are assembled there in France, and it's cased and regulated there in France as well. That's not uncommon. I would think a lot of movement manufacturers have suppliers providing them parts. And Yema only puts out about 30,000 of their in-house movements a year. Now let's get into this bracelet. It is stainless steel. Tapers from 19 millimeters down to 15.8 on my calipers. You've got pinned links, solid end links with a signed fold-over clasp with micro adjustments. Bracelet to me seems standard for this price point. You can also get this watch with a Viton rubber strap or the Marine Nationale parachute strap. I like the parachute strap. I thought it really looked good, but they sent this one on the bracelet, which is nice and gets the job done. So my general opinions on this watch, when I took it out of the case, I think the strong suit of this watch is the blue-yellow contrast, just the overall design. The dome sapphire crystal, I think, is beautiful. Now, some people may not like that, how it plays with the light, and you can see that in a lot of these images. You'll see sort of like some swirl marks on the dial. That isn't the dial. That's just the light coming through the edge of the dome sapphire. I like it. I think that's the point of this watch, is it gives you some vintage vibe to it. So I love this dome sapphire. I love the blue and yellow contrast. It's very nautical. It's just the first thing you feel about this watch. It just feels like you should be on a boat, on a ship. It just gives you a very nautical vibe to it. Setting the GMT function is very easy. You're basically going to unscrew the crown, pull out to the first position where you would set the date. If you go forward on the crown, you would be setting the date. If you go back, you're going to set the GMT function. Really easy and quick to set, not difficult. I found all the settings very easy to work with. So you see, you're just going back on the crown and you're setting the GMT function. You go forward, you're setting the date. Then you screw the crown in. The one thing that it's kind of a catch-22 about this watch when you're screwing in the crown is you've got these wonderful crown guards. But when you're trying to screw the crown in, you hit against the crown guard. I would not want them to take the crown guards off. I like that protection, but you kind of have to get used to using the tips of your fingers to screw that crown in. It's not a bad thing. It's just when you have a screwed in crown and crown guards, it's just something that you've got to learn to work with. Again, it's just me nitpicking at it. It's not really a big deal. I can't find any other things that I really could poke at on this watch. I mean, the bracelet, I would like the links to be screwed in just because it makes it a lot easier to remove links. Other than that, pin links, they are what they are. That's probably the only other thing I would want to see is maybe beef this bracelet up with some screwed in links so you could size it easier. Other than that, the watch has a nice weight to it. The bezel, you've got a bidirectional bezel. I found that it was really easy to move. The loom is killer on this bezel, and that's where you've got that day and night indicator. That's another thing that strikes you right away when you go into a dark room and you see that lower 50% of that bezel start to glow. I thought that was a really cool feature about this watch. The blue, the yellow, the loom on this thing. I just really like the layout of this dial. I love this case. It just exudes kind of a vintage 70s, 60s style. That's why I wanted to see it in person. On my wrist, I felt that it wears great. 38.5 by 46, especially on a GMT. Now that's a problem that I have. Looking for a GMT that I like, that's going to fit my wrist was hard. This one is just ideal. I've got adequate space on either side of these lugs. It doesn't look too large. And really, because of this vintage vibe, I think this is a watch you can wear a day in the ocean or at work. It is just really cool vibe. And I like that there's this backstory to Yema and that these are actually being associated with the French military. I like that. So is this for you? Some of the strong points are in-house movement. Now, if you're somebody that is big on an in-house movement, you're going to like that. Seems like Yema has put the effort and time into getting this caliber 3000 up to speed. The finish, the history of this watch and what it can do, and to get a GMT for $1,300, I think is worth it on this watch. Now, this would be the first Yema I've had my hands on from their new production. I like it. I think it's definitely one you should consider when you're looking at a GMT. I don't know, you tell me. What do you think? Do you own a Yema? Have you been thinking about this one? I'd love to hear about it in the comments below, guys. And as always, I appreciate you tuning in to Cold Pizza Watch Reviews.